So before we jump into my thoughts and gripes, I need to preface this video with a few things. 1. There will be spoilers ahead, likely both in my talking about it and in video, as it's a relatively short game, so I can only show so much before having the video loop around without showing something minor at least. 2. As the title suggests, this is my thoughts, not a review, so don't expect to see a number score at the end. Score reviews are entirely based on a person's experience with that game and personal taste, so slapping an arbitrary number on it at the end means literally nothing. Besides that, I've never been terribly good at math, so most numbers over 4 scare me. Now that we've gotten those disclaimers out of the way, let's actually start the video. Death's Gambit is going to feel very familiar to Soulsborne fans, as it's quite obvious in the theming, mechanics, and characters that 2D Dark Souls was kind of the goal. It isn't necessarily a bad thing. The game emulates the dark atmosphere quite well, while also adding in a different kind of horror as you progress in the form of hallucinated sequences, alongside a sliver of humor that shines through in certain places. Now, that's all well and good, but to get a proper idea of the game as a whole, you have to break it down a little more. So let's start with the mechanics. This is where most Souls fans are going to see the similarities. You have one combo depending on your weapon of choice, a block, parry, and riposte, shield kick, dodge roll, and a couple more attacks you can do out of a dodge or while jumping. You rest and level at death idols, which are essentially bonfires, and in place of Estus flasks, you have phoenix feathers. All very familiar. Now let's talk about where it diverges from the Souls formula. Normally, upon death in a Souls game, you lose all your money and experience you earned to that point, and have to do a corpse run to reclaim it. Death's Gambit makes the consequences for death a little more brutal. Instead of leaving all your XP and money behind, you drop a phoenix feather, arguably your most important resource in the game. Thankfully, if you die again before reclaiming it, you haven't lost it forever, you just drop another one. If you're getting beaten too badly now that you've lost most of your healing items, you can spend the equivalent of a level up at one of your death idols to get them all back, so you're never entirely screwed. There is progression other than leveling, however. Alongside gear upgrades at your Voodoo Witch Doctor Blacksmith, there is special abilities you can learn from NPCs, and a skill tree that you get points for after every boss, with various skills from recovering stamina faster while blocking, to having an air dash that acts as a dodge. Speaking of bosses, they have a unique feature I actually quite like in this game. If you return to a boss arena, for one you've already killed, there will be a floating icon of them in the center, which you can then use to both learn some of the attacks that that boss used against you, and to have a rematch with a quote-unquote heroic version of the boss, which will mean they're far tougher and have some new attacks. There is incentive to do this, as they'll drop rare upgrade materials as well as highly upgraded gear. One heroic boss is even linked to a secret area in the game that I unintentionally screwed myself out of far before I even learned that it existed. So now that I've covered the core mechanics, let's tackle the story, which there isn't really too much to tackle. You open the game in the aftermath of a failed battle in which your expedition of soldiers was terribly slaughtered. After waking up in a pile of corpses being tossed on a pyre by a lizard man named Rail, who you'll see quite often. And now I need to interject the story explanation, because this is a Souls-like, and you can kill this guy at the start. That tends to glitch a few things, so, don't do that. Anyway, soon after, you're recruited by Death himself in order to destroy a source of power that's keeping lots of incredibly strong beings effectively immortal, as they're reborn not too long after death. And this is upsetting some kind of cosmic balance. Soren, your main character, has his own reasons for coming along, however, as he's looking for his mother, who herself was a soldier, and the only parent that didn't seemingly abandon you. Now unable to die due to Death himself being your sugar daddy, your journey to slaughter immortals and find your mother begins, gaining clues and progressing through the checklist of bosses, until you come face to face with Endless, your primary antagonist who claims to have all the information you're looking for. And you do eventually get this information out of them at the end of the game, which I won't reveal here, but just know after playing through the rest of the game, the big reveal is pretty obvious and cliched, which makes the ending rather disappointing. There are some side stories, however, throughout the game concerning Vrail and two other NPCs. However, unlike Souls games, you're going to see these two along the way without any real issue. They're kind of ingrained in the story. The third, however, is very well hidden, and I only discovered it through the game's wiki after having played through it twice. While the primary antagonist is a little half-baked, I can happily say that the world around you isn't. And the side characters, for me at least, were the real stars of the show. Your primary two are Vrail, the tough guy lizard man, and Ione, a misguided enemy turned ally after you kick her ass a couple of times. Both of these characters have their own reasons for being in the land, which is slowly revealed over the course of the game between both combat dialogue and interactions with you both in and outside of the hub area. These two are the NPCs that really shine through and are legitimately interesting people. And despite all I saw of them, including having them enter the final area as allies, I wanted to know and see more of them. Aside from them, you have to find and save most NPCs to get them back in the hub, including your chill, lazy, but extraordinarily useful voodoo blacksmith, an archer who can teach you special trick skills with your bow, and a giant who can teach you skills with greatswords and hammers. There's a few others already around, such as the shopkeep, who never really gets much, a secondary shopkeep if you decided to start as a noble class, who also doesn't really get much except for maybe giving you a highly upgraded weapon at the start, and another survivor of your expedition, who I unfortunately didn't get to learn much of for reasons I won't get into here. A snail sage who wants you to kill him, word of advice, don't do it, and another lizard man who you buy all the skills from if you're going to use daggers, and then kill immediately. You will miss a little information on Vrail if you kill him, but you keep other things from happening that won't ruin your game, but will keep you from getting certain very useful skills. There is another NPC that will sell abilities for scythe weapons, but in my playthrough I never found them, and in the area they're supposed to be in is Blighttown but worse, so I can't be bothered to look for them. Only one thing left to go over, and that's the few gripes that I have with the game that aren't really deal breakers, but definitely stood out considering how solid the rest of the game is. First is the selection of weapons. There's only about 19 weapons in the game, and most of the useful ones can either be bought from the shopkeep in the hub or just started with by one of the classes. In fact, I didn't change my primary weapon once in my entire playthrough, unless I just found an upgraded version. The only time I actually changed weapons was the bow I had as a secondary, and even then, I only did it twice. Considering the stat system and the big Souls inspiration, I was just kind of expecting more variety. Speaking of the stat system, it's not the system itself, but a certain stat that I take issue with. After 2 playthroughs, FEA, which now I know is the fear stat, to my knowledge, does nothing. Now that's not to say it doesn't do anything, I just don't have the slightest idea as to what it could be. You can't level it, and it only seems to increase upon death to a boss, but it's never explained or acknowledged. So unless it's actually just a death counter, I have no idea what it could possibly be. My last issue with the game is very specific. There's a specific trap that pushes you out of a hallway in the final area of the game. It's not hard or frustrating to deal with, but it is extraordinarily glitchy, pushing me through walls every time I failed to get past it, and at one point, out of the map entirely. As you're climbing your way to the final battle and about to complete the game at this time, it does take away a lot of the excitement and tension, and it just feels like this specific trap wasn't tested at all. Overall, the game's very well done, and a nice adventure for anyone interested in Souls-like genre or dark themes. My issues with it are pretty minor. It is short, coming in at around 15 hours for a playthrough, but I'd recommend it for anyone looking for a little extra Soulsborne experience without having to play through the games for a 13th time. And those are my thoughts on Death's Gambit.